when Rebekah was about to give birth. It is told in Genesis 25 that there were twins in her womb. And we read from verse 25, the first to come out was red. His whole body was like hairy garment. So they named him Esau. After this, his brother came out, with his hand grasping Esau's heel. So he was named Jacob. Welcome to another tidbit from the Bible. I'm Dr. Paul Petersen, and in this quarter we are reading Genesis. We read about the patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And this week and next week we are focusing on Jacob, whose hand was grasping the heel of his brother when he was born. In Hebrew, the word for heel is ekeb. So he became Yaakov, the one who grasps the heel. Now, that suggests something cunning, sneaky. Jacob's main trait of character was cunningness. He was a cheater. And we'll see how this pops up in the narratives about him. Now, before he was born, his mother asked God and received a prophecy. We read that in verse 23. 2 nations are in your womb, and 2 peoples from within you will be separated. One people will be stronger than the other, and the older will serve the younger. This is a prophecy. It is a prophecy about who among the 2 will receive the privilege of being the first one, and it is not the firstborn. That was not the case with Cain, the firstborn. It was not the case with Ishmael, and it will not be the case here. God turns the expectations around. And Jacob is elected before he is born to carry on the seed and receive the promises. What were the promises? In the following chapter, in chapter 26, the promise is repeated to Isaac. And let me read from the center of verse 3. God speaks to Isaac, "For to you and your descendants I will give all these lands, and will confirm the oath I swore to your father Abraham. I will make your descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky." That is a reference back to chapter 15. "I will give them all these lands, and through your offspring all nations on earth will be blessed because Abraham obeyed me." So the promise contains at least 2 major aspects. The promise of numerous descendants, the promise to become a great nation, and the promise in your descendants to have the offspring in whom all families, all generations on earth will be blessed. That is the promise given the first time to Eve in the Garden of Eden in Genesis 3:15, the promise of a Messiah. How did Jacob achieve it? And Jacob was cunning, and he tried to achieve it his own way. The story in the latter part of chapter 25 tells about an incident where Esau, who was a wild fellow, a hunter, came back exhausted and very hungry, and Jacob, who was favored by his mother Rebekah, he was back home and cooking. Nothing bad about being a good chef, is there? And Esau was so hungry that he superficially wanted to give away whatever just to be satisfied. And Jacob used his cunningness to get Esau to give him his firstborn firstborn's right. Now, the big cheating by Jacob is described in chapter 27. Even in spite of the prophecy that Jacob should be the main heir. Isaac liked the fruit of the wild, and he preferred Esau. Rebekah preferred Jacob. That didn't sound good for a family unity. And one day, Isaac decided it is time to confirm legally who's going to be my heir. He has chosen Esau. He asked Esau to go out into the wild and get him some food. But Rebekah listens in on the conversation. She hurries to Jacob and says, now we have to do something, otherwise your brother will run away with the first prize. So she cooks and she sends Jacob to his aging father, who at that time has lost his vision and his ability to discern. And then you have the major conversation from verse 18. Jacob, in 27, Jacob went to his father and said, my father. Yes, my son. Who is it? Jacob said to his father, I am Esau, your firstborn. It becomes worse. Isaac asked his son, how did you find this food so quickly, my son? And then Jacob tells, the Lord your God gave me success. Not only he's cheating, he's using God as support for his trickery. And then a little later, because Isaac is still dubious, is it really Esau? So he asked him that question in verse 24, are you really my son Esau? He asked, I am, Jacob replied. And he receives the legal blessing. It's done. Now he's the heir. What is all this about? When you read in Genesis, you read generations, genealogies, you read about the patriarchs, and one of the main themes is the theme of identity. Who are you? Later on, the Israelites would say, we are children of Abraham. The leaders of the Jews would say that to Jesus in John 8, we are the children of Abraham. Or they would boast to say, we are the sons of, the daughters of, the children of Jacob. When you read the narratives about the patriarchs, you realize they were not that perfect. Even Abraham was not justified because of his righteousness, his honesty, certainly not, but because of his faith. He lied to the Egyptian Pharaoh. He lied to the Philistine king. His son Isaac repeats that lie, claiming his wife not to be his real wife. Oh, they knew how to cheat. Jacob has not learned that from foreigners, from Gentiles. And actually, as you read these narratives, you realize that some of these narratives are there to explain why Abraham and his sons, or son Isaac and Jacob, could not just take over the land at that time. In chapter 15, it is said that the sins of the Amorites have not reached their climax. That will come later. So much in these chapters tell about the relationship between those who formally believe in God and the Gentiles. And it is not black and white. But then, of course, the question of identity pops up. Who am I? Who are you? I'm the son of Abraham. Is that because you are faithful? Or is it also because you sometimes cheat or lie? I'm the son of, or the daughter of Jacob. Are you proud of being a deceiver? And the message is, we belong to the family of God because of the grace of God alone. That grace comes to the fore in the next chapter, in chapter 28. Now here, Jacob has to flee because Rebekah, his mother, has found out that Esau wants to kill him. So Jacob is fleeing back to Mesopotamia, the excuse to Isaac to find a decent wife. And he flees, he's alone, he's lonely. And in the night, as he arrives at Bethel, the house of God, he has a dream. He sees a ladder of God and sees angels coming up and down, and he realizes that he is surrounded by the grace of God. And he promises in the end of that chapter, in verse 20, if God will be with me and will watch over me on this journey I'm taking, and will give me food to eat and clothes to wear, so that I return safely to my father's house, then the Lord will be my God, and this stone that I have set up as a pillar, he was doing that to worship God, will be God's house, and of all that you give me, I will give you a tenth. There are two ways to understand this. One is, he was so overwhelmed with the grace of God that he just expressed, oh, if this really is true. At the same time, there's still an if. He's still cunning. He's still trading, isn't he? If God is with me, then when I return, I will give tithe of everything. Why did God elect Jacob? We know why he elected Abraham. He called him out of Ur, and he confirmed the calling and the promise because Abraham was willing in faith to sacrifice Isaac. And Isaac was elected because he thereby became the type of the future sacrificial lamb of Jesus Christ the Messiah. Jacob is elected. Though he is a deceiver, he is elected to show God's sovereignty in the election. So you and I are children of Abraham. We are children of Jacob, the deceiver. But the story of Jacob does not end here. And the second part we will look at for next week. Welcome back to another tidbit from the Bible, from Genesis. I'm Dr. Paul Petersen, and we are going to look at Jacob the victor.